Recruiters and HR, what red flags do you find in a resume which means the interviewee is not what they seem? Attention! If you plan to give examples of a bad, inappropriate email address on a resume, do not post an email address, even if it's obviously fake. Rather use something like childish email here. Otherwise your comment will not be seen. We do not allow any type of personal information, even if it's supposed to be fake. See Rule N4 for more details. Thanks, I am a bot, and this action was performed automatically. Please contact the moderators of this subreddit if you have any questions or concerns. A finalist applicant for a senior software developer position checked the box for yes next to have you ever been convicted of a felony? Our workplace does not automatically count out felons, so I looked him up, only to find out his charges were from 10 years prior and had been lowered to a misdemeanor. This guy had been checking yes on those boxes for 10 years and had never actually been convicted of a felony. 5 years worth of graphic design experience, but no portfolio because of a crashed hard drive. This was before cloud backups were much a thing. Rest of the story, I rolled the dice, gave them a chance because all of the other applicants were terrible, and they were one of my best hires. Not in HR, but when I ran a small office years ago, I received a resume from a young woman who bragged she was a member of Mensa, had been a research associate at a prestigious university, etc. She also mentioned 3 times she was not a Republican. I thought, well, cool, but I don't think that really has anything to do with the job. It took me about a day to figure out she was trying to say she was a notary public, which threw the whole Mensa thing into doubt. Dude put on his resume CCNA-1 under certifications. The CCNA is a Cisco network certification. During the interview I asked what the -1 meant. He said, oh, I missed the certification by only 1 question. I asked how we could verify that. He sort of shrugged. I once read one of someone who claimed to have a psychology degree from the university I had attended. Since it was several states away, this stuck out. Since he didn't know how to spell psychology, I obviously knew he was lying, but it was open panel interviews, so I spoke with him face to face anyway. The look of shock and terror in his eyes when I said I was thrilled to see that we were alums from the same place and started discussing details of campus was kind of fun to witness. Not an official manager, but I did take part in the hiring process at the store where I used to work as a senior associate, so I reviewed a lot of resumes. The biggest one was when the person was way overqualified. I was at a failing, no-name gun store run by a guy who thought that he was going to be the next gun superstore, next manufacturer of America's service weapons, and next major private military company. That's a story for another day. My manager, who was the only person who kept the company running, showed me a resume from a guy who claimed he was an armorer and gunsmith for 3rd Special Forces Group and Delta Force, had been a primary consultant for just about every major small arms and missile system used in the United States military, had been consultant to dozens of police departments on service weapons and tactics, among other things that should have made him want to only apply to U.S. government positions and large firearms manufacturers. So what was he doing applying to some no-name gun store? My BS meter went up, and so did that of my manager. Our stupid boss, of course, ignored our warnings and hired the guy. Turns out, he completely lied. I spent most of my time fixing all the things he wrecked, apologizing to customers for him not doing his work, and having to sit through him making blatantly false claims about technical facts regarding firearms. I was following up with references one time on 3 different employees. We are seasonal, so we do a big hire all at once. Employee 1. The first person I called was extremely confrontational and asked why I was calling her of all people. I explained she was listed as a reference and dead silence. Then I went to high school with her 30 years ago, barely knew her then and haven't talked to her since. Employee number 2, reference said to me she listed me as her boss. I met her once in passing, We worked in the same building but different departments with completely different management. I've never worked with this person, nor could I tell you her job title. Employee 3. What did my daughter do this time? When I asked if I was speaking with, insert name, so she listed her mom as a reference. I asked if her daughter had ever worked for her, as it was listed she was her last boss, and she laughed and said number. All three of those were automatic no's. Had a buddy put that he could speak Japanese fluently on his resume and applied to a Japanese manufacturing company in the US. During the interview, the hiring manager asked him about it and he promptly responded, "Hi, Nihongo ga wakarimashita." So they went and got one of the Japanese and was like, "Okay Mr. Honda, have a conversation with this guy." Needless to say, all my buddy could say was hi, and it was very awkward for everyone involved. He is a demos, haha. Just last month I was hiring a receptionist team lead for a clinic, and one of our candidates spent a good quarter of a page telling us about his boxing career, including statistics that meant absolutely nothing to me. I had a resume once where a guy had obviously just copy and pasted job descriptions as his work history. It was blatantly obvious because everything was in third person. Guy didn't even take the time to edit it. Candidate will be able to type wording. I gave him an interview and asked him tough questions based off of his supposed work experience. I was morbidly curious if he was just bad at writing resumes or just a lazy liar. Turns out he was the latter. When I interview someone I usually try and ease up on questions when it's obvious the candidate doesn't have the required experience. I don't want someone living totally demoralized, etc. I didn't let up on this guy though, and when he couldn't answer a question I would comment that he had it listed in his resume. Hopefully he learned a lesson. There was a period where people would attach a photo of themselves on or with the resume. I had a young girl about 18-19 attach a photo to her resume. The issue was that the photo was of her in a bikini on her knees at the water's edge with her hands behind her head sticking her chest out. She was smoking hot but did not quite make the short list. She may have gotten the job if we had an eye for tail and not detail. She should have checked what she was sending. The recruiting team at my company tossed away a CV from a guy because he had Domino's pizza delivery driver on it as his current role. When I'm hiring for my team I make it a point to look at bid CVs just to check I'm not missing a diamond in the rough. When I looked at this guy's credentials, it turned out that he was driving for Domino's while completing his master's degree and he had technical qualifications up to his eyeballs. I hired him after bringing him in for interviews and he's now my right-hand man. Another guy I interviewed had a perfect CV but refused to shake my hand or make eye contact throughout the interview. That was a big nope. Another started ranting about his current company and how shit they are. Another nope. Hiring people is exhausting. Not doing any hiring, recruiting now, but when I did, a big red flag was when someone had a string of brief jobs, especially if they were all in the same field. If someone was young and worked 6 months at Big Hamburger and 6 months at Amusement Park X before entering the field, no big deal. If someone over 25 had a resume with every other mental health provider in the area and didn't make it any of those agencies, it was an indicator that they wouldn't be a good fit for us, either. A huge red flag, but too late. The guy that showed up for the job was clearly not the same guy as was in the phone interview. Impossible to prove, and messy since he had been given the job. He's still with us. Too many jobs in too short period of time was always a red flag, but lately with all that's gone on, I've had 3 different jobs in a year when my original career was decimated by the pandemic, so I have a changed perspective now. Edit. Red flag doesn't mean they're out or have no chance. It means I will dig deeper. Could be circumstances or it could be you. Depends on your qualifications and skills, not experience, that dictate my actions. Edit 2. Thank you all for the great discussions and stories surrounding this. Trying to read them all and respond. Also, I was a hiring manager so I saw things a little different than a recruiter or hours person. I had to put the right piece in place to make my team atmosphere a non-toxic environment. before word processing software and online applications. My two biggest red flags was not being able to spell the name of the school they claimed to have graduated from and the name of the street they lived on. Not currently either of the two, but a friend of mine had a paragraph about his WoW gaming and his levels. He didn't get a job until he removed it. I was HR, hiring for a restaurant, and one of the Polish applicants had steroid and bodybuilding supplement supplier as his self-employment. That wasn't easy, no? Someone claimed to be a member of the New York State Bar, admission pending, which I thought meant that he had already passed the NY bar, but just needed to submit the doc requirements and take the oath. During the interview, I asked when he could start and he said right after he takes the NY bar exam later that week, then he could start right after. Okay. And I'm a PhD candidate too, just wait and let me submit my application. I left my previous job due to a bad manager who would bully and belittle us. She made our work lives hell and tried to do the same with our personal lives too. Then 3 years later she was fired. In that time I had been promoted at my new job and I was hiring my replacement. She knew I would be interviewing as my details were on the job advertisement, but she applied for the role with a copy of my CV with her name attached. She must have kept my CV from when I worked for her, which is a breach in data protection. But how on earth she thought I wouldn't notice or remember her truly goes to show how delusional she was. I was helping recruiting a new dev, but there was this one guy who was selected for the interview that I did not see, was checked by other team members. Alright. So far so good. It was strange that he went straight to the interview without doing a task first, but they said he was very experienced, so alright. He went to the interview and in the end the boss, who didn't know anything about code, was incredibly amazed. I think I never saw him that amazed at any other professional. Fast forward, dude was just a heavyweight on us. We were doing all the work. He was impossible to hit discussions with because anything different than his opinion or crossing the borders of his knowledge, he was snap. He was way older than us and treated us like dumb children. He was far too old school and refused to upgrade his game. He was also earning far more than everyone in the whole company and he never did a task to get in. He just used his BS talk and sold him immediately as a genius, but 5 minutes into talking to him introducing ourselves and I noticed that he was a jerk who would make it hard on everyone. I keep a fairly low profile in my organization, and when interviewing to promote within I have had people attempt to subtly claim responsibility for work they didn't know was actually mine. Usually people who do this aren't intending to lie, they just don't really recognize the depth of some of the things we do. Kinda related. We insisted on consultants doing a presentation, sometimes on a software item but mainly on our company history. Honestly, it wasn't about the content, but how they presented, dealt with questions, etc. We had one guy come in, insist that no one see his presentation ahead of time and that he'd bring his own laptop. We got suspicious and invited lots of people along, to be presented with a dramatized version of our company history made from badly formed Lego people, in which he had a script with awful punchlines. The final punchline got mixed up, so his dramatic ending was ruined by shuffling of papers and a lot of them I got that wrong. He'd spent weeks on this, but zero time on how he was a good consultant or remembering his CV. Poor lad was terrible and we just couldn't take a punt on him. I once saw a retail CV where the person said they had great attention to detail and then immediately followed that by saying they had extensive experience working with costumers. You forgot the serious tag, made skeptical. In a resume, red flags I've seen may be overly charged, resumed with meaningless information. Focus on what you know is relevant for the job. If it's not directly relevant but you want it mentioned, keep it short and to the point. I don't care about your GCSE grades or the entire curriculum of your courses. Just tell me what you learned that is gonna help you do the job correctly. I need to see why you fit the position advertised, not that you've done 1,000 irrelevant feats. A resume with a very high number of typos and spelling mistakes, a couple of errors here and there, I can understand, but if you clearly didn't make an effort to triple check your resume or if you have issues or trouble in this area, didn't take the time to ask someone to help you with it. It tells a lot about the kind of work I can expect from you. I worked as sort of the HR person for a few years. We did sheet metal manufacturing and we'd often advertise for general labor jobs. We often got applications filled out by people for whom English was a difficult second language. I laughed out loud at one application because where we asked something along the lines of what skills, qualities do you have that would make you an asset to our team? The applicant wrote 2 words, posture and beauty. That made me laugh for a few days until I realized there was a mattress manufacturer in town called Posture Beauty which also went through waves of hiring general laborers. Here I thought this guy was telling us he was eye candy. Still makes me laugh. I saw a lady set off her patient bathroom emergency alarm because there wasn't anyone at the front desk. When several people came to address the alarm, she started asking about a job. That is like calling 911, and when the police arrive, ask them about a job. For me it's when someone who's young with lots of wordy descriptions for basic jobs. Senior executive in charge of caffeine distribution isn't the title. You got coffee. Embrace that. It's fine. If you were the best coffee runner, fine. Glorifying basic crap in a resume makes you come across as a liar. The resume is what gets you the interview, so if you're physically there it means your resume is good. Now if you don't know why you're there ... that is, you can't answer basic questions about the job you've applied for or you just seem like a different person, it means that A, someone else wrote your application and B, you haven't prepared either or both, or I've done a bad job and haven't caught on that you were obviously lying in your application. Hiring for a graphic design role, which has a lot to do with branding and making the brand distinctive, stick out from competitors. Applicant goes on about attention to detail and how she is a branding expert, puts our old logo, which we haven't used in over 2 years, on her application. Submitting a full-body photo with your resume, for an office job, for an acting job, sure, makes sense. For an office job, I've seen people include a headshot on their resume which personally I think is weird, but okay, but you do not need to send a full-body shot of what looks like yourself dressed up for some sorority event in college. It's creepy and comes off inappropriate. When I'm looking at multiple candidates with similar work experience, someone who inexplicably submits a full-body photo with their resume is definitely not getting an interview. I wish I could say I've only come across this once. It's bizarre. This thread is depressing because it's making me realize just how nitty-gritty these details matter, but also how they really don't, because so much of this is up to the person's personal feelings about it. Also, overqualified is a measure of how long they think you will stay before leaving for a better position. The cost-benefit analysis of hiring and training you versus how long you produce actual value for the company before you deem your place too underpaid to be worth your time. This is a stupid measure that ignores that higher position jobs are in short supply and people need any work available. When they don't even show up for the interview, I know that's not exactly what OP is asking. But when I was hiring, the HR department would qualify candidates and set up interviews. I'd confirm the day before, and still, about 50% of people would just not show up, or they'd come up with some stupid excuse. So, I'd give them a second chance and ask to reschedule, and then they'd never get back to me. My coworkers told me it was because they were most likely on unemployment and had to apply to jobs to keep their benefits, but didn't want to actually work. Years ago, recruiters would be given a certain number of adverts that had to be used. Got so fed up of developers saying they had experience in a language that when Earl tested they didn't have a clue. One lad would always lose his shit about this and decided to invent a language called Bixby Pro 4.2 and included it in his advert, saying that applicants needed at least 12-month experience if Bixby Pro 4.2. We got CVs with Bixby Pro experience connoted in skills. It's not the hiring manager or HR, but happened to be in my boss's office while she was going through resumes. While we were talking, I noticed a name on the top of the stack that looked familiar, and quickly glanced to see if I could confirm who I thought it was. Once we were done talking, I said I don't mean to intrude, but if that resume belongs to the person I think it does, she's a felon. It was someone I'd gone to college with that was very proud of her bad bitch status and drug use, often told me about how her boyfriend was back in jail for dealing, and how she didn't have physical custody of her daughter. Not that felons can't be solid workers, but in our industry it's kind of important not to be. She thought it was so funny and let me look it over to confirm. She said, well, that explains the 4-year gap here. Even called her to send her one of those pre-interview questionnaires, and this girl called back to ask the answers because she couldn't find them. These answers are freely available on our website and most are common sense. Copy and pasting. Or I had one guy that linked the website portfolio with videos he made. I think they were supposed to be artistic but were full of creepy images about murder and death, and videos. Pictures of him playing the bassoon because he was a professional bassoonist. Unfortunately, I was hiring for a math, science tutor and this wasn't very relevant to the job lol.